Here at St. Paul, at our parish, we prepared ourselves for Christmas by looking at our Blessed Mother as a model and example. Our theme for Advent was Journeying to Christmas with Mary, and we looked at her. She guided us. I'd like to keep up that motif today and look at the three wise men and their journey to Bethlehem. And what can we learn from them? What can the wise men teach us? God brought them to Bethlehem, and their journey can teach us something. Let's look at the wise men. We know that the wise men were not Jews. They came from the east. What we do know is that they were very intelligent people. They were smart. They studied. They were those who looked and they knew the stars. All ancient cultures were stargazers. In fact, up until electricity, everybody studied the stars. And nearly every culture could use the stars for navigation. They knew them so well. I couldn't navigate across the street with the stars now. But that's not how it used to be. And these men knew the stars well. They were men of science. And they paid attention. They gazed. They studied. They thought. They reasoned. And they knew that something was up. They knew that something was happening in the heavens. We learned from them the importance of knowledge. We were given brains. We were meant to use them, to use our reason. But these men, these wise men, not only did they study and use their minds and knew that something was going on in the heavens themselves didn't say what was happening, but just said that something was happening. And so they used their reason, but then they had to use faith. They had to listen to the voice of the prophets of this little religion in Israel, saying that the movement of the stars means the coming of the Messiah. These men put faith in what all of this meant. Faith is putting trust into something, believing something to be true. And so what we see with these men are faith and reason working well together. Using your mind, using science and reason, but also marrying that with faith. Both are essential. Faith without reason is not good. Faith without using your mind, without reason, can get really goofy. Because a faith that is not attached to something rational, reasonable, you can come up with some really superstitious and crazy things. For example, you might all drink suicide Kool-Aid. You go, well, that's stupid. That's right. It's not attached to reason. Faith needs to be attached to something reasonable. Likewise, reason, all on its own, apart from faith, leads to an understanding of the universe that has no meaning attached to it. Did you hear what I just said? If I just go based upon reason, it's very difficult to come to an understanding of why are you here? What's the purpose of your life? For example, I can observe the stars, I can observe the universe, but the universe doesn't contain the meaning in itself. We have to derive meaning from it or place meaning onto it. That comes from us. Does that make sense? Let me give another example. This Christmas tree. If there was a group of people that had no idea what Christmas was, they're from another planet, who knows? And I present to them a Christmas tree, like this one. Beautiful tree with lights and ornaments on that. And I place this tree in front of them. Now they have no idea what Christmas is. And they can observe that Christmas tree. Just by observing that tree, could they come to understand that this tree means Christmas? That it means Jesus born in a manger? Peace and goodwill? Just by observing the tree? That's an interpretation we put onto it. Does that make sense? So things themselves don't have meaning. We have to give meaning to them. That's what we do. Does that make sense? We can observe, but then we come to understand the meaning of things through faith. I can look at you, and I can see that all of you are human beings. But I can also look at you and say, all of you in your diversity of race and gender are all brothers and sisters in Christ, and therefore I owe to you the deepest respect. That's a whole different thing, isn't it? So seeing you as brothers and sisters in Christ, that took an interpretation. So in other words, we have science, faith, reason, wonderful things. And we have our faith, what comes to us from Christ, the Gospels, what we trust in, of how we understand the world. And these two things come together, and they become the lenses that we look through. And so as I look through those two lenses, I see the people of God, whom I will love and respect and honor because God has told me. I take away that lens, you're just people, and I can do whatever I want. Right? I get to create my own interpretation. No? That's how it works. That's how the world works. What the Magi teach us is they took reason and they put faith in the God of Israel. And they chose to look at the world that way, and it radically changed their lives. And in the end, that faith, that way that we're going to choose to look at the world, we take a step of faith. We have to trust. We don't always know everything about it. And so the Magi, they go on this journey. They left the east and came to the west, and they didn't know everything that was going to happen. That's the walk of faith. They model for us moving in trust. Sure, they had a really good understanding. They had a basic roadmap, but they didn't have every detail worked out. And so it is with our walk of faith, isn't it? Like you who got married, you had the basic roadmap of your life. Has your actual life followed that roadmap perfectly? In many ways it has, and in many ways it hasn't, huh? That's the walk of faith that we all are on. What the Magi teach us, they teach us, use your brains. Think, study, know your faith. Know what we believe. Observe the world. Think rationally. We have a church that is very reasonable, well thought, rational. And then have faith. Grow your faith. Develop your faith. Become people of prayer. And I want us to take a moment on that. We all understand how we can grow in knowledge, but sometimes we struggle, how do I grow in faith? Faith is simply believing what somebody else has told us. That's really basically what faith is. Faith is believing what someone has told us. I have never been to Hawaii, but I hear it's wonderful. And I believe people that have been there. I have nothing else to do but to put my faith in them and say, yeah. And I've seen books, I've seen things, but in the end, I haven't been there myself, so I put my faith. That's a simple understanding of faith. I'm trusting what witnesses have told me. And so we grow in faith. I wasn't there at the manger scene in Bethlehem. I wasn't there, but there's people who were. And they passed on the story. There were people who were at the empty tomb. There's people who were there and who were fed by the loaves and fishes. There were people who Jesus touched and healed their blindness. And they told the story. And they passed it on. And I believed them. I put my faith in them. I trust them. And in trusting them, I have come ultimately to trust that Jesus is who he says he is. I believe in God. And that is the lens in which I look through. So how do you grow in faith? To be a person of prayer, but in a simple way, Are you a trusting person? We have to learn to trust. Because ultimately, if I'm going to believe God, I have to learn to trust. This is why people who have been really hurt oftentimes stop believing in God, because they don't know how to trust anymore. That's why it's important that we don't hurt each other. Because when we hurt each other, we wound people's capacity to love God. And when we wound children especially, they lose trust in a father, in a mother. And they have a hard time trusting the Father. This is why the command from God is that we love one another and not hurt each other, because we break down trust and erodes faith. So a good way to grow faith is grow in your own confidence and trust in little things. Be willing to hand things over in trust. You become a more trusting person. And a trusting person in the end has the capacity to become a very faithful person, like the wise men. They put their trust in that prophecy. And then they walked out in faith. That took a lot of trust. And I imagine these were very trustworthy men, which means they were very humble men. They were very smart, they were very humble, and willing to place their trust in the hands of somebody else and walk in faith. So that's what we learned from them. So I thank God for these wise men. And I don't know where you are on your journey of faith, but I hope that your journey leads to Bethlehem, leads to truth. So pursue the truth, because the truth will always in the end lead to God. And learn to trust, but especially to trust the Gospels and to trust the teachings of the church. Because in the end, we're going to have some way we look at the world. We're going to have some way to interpret it. And I'm going to choose the way of Christ and the way of the gospel. Because I think it's the best way. It's the true way. And it's well thought out. And I believe it wholeheartedly. And I invite you as well to believe.